He's just Keir Starmer in jeans. That phrase, published 4 days ago, has now become the defining frame of Andy Burnham's entire leadership campaign. And my friends, I have spent the last 48 hours going through the evidence, and I have to tell you, it is more uncomfortable than you might think, because the case for Burnham is real, but so is the case against, and today we're looking at both. So for those just catching up, because this week has moved at absolutely breakneck speed, here is what has happened. Keir Starmer resigned as Prime Minister on Monday morning. Tearful, a man who came to power with the biggest Labour majority since Tony Blair just 2 years ago and managed to make himself so deeply, comprehensively unpopular that Reform UK led the national polls for 18 months straight. Remarkable in its own way. And in that vacuum, within hours, stepped Andy Burnham, fresh from the most extraordinary by-election result in recent British political history, Makerfield, a constituency that voted heavily for Brexit in 2016, a constituency where Reform had a 20-point lead in the local elections just last month, and Burnham walks in and takes 55% of the vote. Reform crushed, it wasn't close. You can absolutely see why Labour thinks it's found its messiah. You can see why West Streeting immediately steps aside. You can see why the bookmakers have him at 88% on Polymarket. The coronation was essentially over before the confetti settled. But my friends, this is where it gets interesting, because the question that is now tearing through political commentary, from Reddit to the Telegraph, is the one that Burnham's team would most like you not to ask. Is he genuinely different? Or is he just Keir Starmer in jeans? Now, I want to be straight with you, my friends, because I always try to be. I'm not a particular Andy Burnham superfan, but credit where credit is due, and there is real credit to give today. He speaks human. I mean, that in the most literal sense. Keir Starmer could walk into a room full of people, look them dead in the eye, and somehow make every single one of them feel like they were attending a risk management seminar. Andy Burnham is not that. He is warm, he has a northern directness that people respond to. When he speaks, you believe he actually believes what he's saying. That is genuinely rare in the current political landscape, and it matters. Manchester record is also real. The B network, bringing Greater Manchester's buses under public control for the first time since Thatcher. That actually happened. Imperfect, patchy in places, but it happened. When he talks about Manchesterism, devolving power away from Westminster, building community wealth, investing in public services from the ground up, there are actual people in the north of England whose lives are materially different because of this man. That is not nothing. And Makerfield, yes, I'm going to have a harder look at that result in a moment, but let's acknowledge it. He beat Reform in their own territory. If you want to argue that the mainstream left can still compete with Farage's movement, that result is your best piece of evidence, and that has to mean something. So yes, there is a version of this story where Andy Burnham is Labour's genuine turning point, where he is the real answer. I want to be fair to that version. Now let me show you why the other version is equally credible, because here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. And I want to go through this carefully because the Starmer in jeans charge isn't just a Reddit insult. There is a real policy case behind it. Immigration, The Guardian, not GB News, not The Telegraph, The Guardian, his own supporters' paper, ran this headline a few days ago. Where exactly does he stand on immigration? Big questions still loom. They cannot tell you what Andy Burnham's immigration policy actually is, because he hasn't said. He hasn't been pressed, and the answers have been polished, careful and non-committal. Sounds familiar. Fiscal rules? He flirted briefly with challenging the existing fiscal rules, the same rules Starmer used to justify cutting the winter fuel payment, then, within days, pledged full loyalty to them. He wants council housing at scale, tens of billions required. He wants to transform social care, tens of billions more. Where's the money coming from, Andy? The answer, apparently, is the same fiscal straitjacket that stopped Starmer from doing anything meaningful either. And then there are the U-turns. Already reversed on welfare for migrants, already shifted on WASPI women and their pension entitlements, already changed position on the debt markets. My friends, 3 significant reversals before he's even in power. That is a politician testing what the establishment will permit him to say. But here is the one I keep coming back to. Andy Burnham's entire pitch rests on this. 40 years of neoliberalism has failed this country. I represent change. That is the rhetorical spine of everything he says. And there it is. Because for 16 of those 40 years, Andy Burnham was not outside that system. 3 cabinet posts under Blair and Brown, 3 posts in 3 years, at the very heart of the project he now campaigns against. And I cannot find a single mainstream interview who has properly pressed him on that contradiction, not one. Now, I said I would come back to Makerfield, and I want to look at it properly. The victory was real, the margin was real, but here is what I think is getting missed in all the excitement. The result was a one-off. Think about what was happening in that by-election. Everyone in the country knew Andy Burnham was using it as a launch pad to become Prime Minister, which meant if you hated reform and wanted to stop them, you voted Burnham. If you hated Keir Starmer and wanted him gone, you also voted Burnham. The Liberal Democrats and the Greens, parties that would normally absorb a chunk of the left-wing vote, got less than 1% combined. Every progressive vote in that constituency collapsed into one man. Those conditions will not exist in 300 constituencies at the same time. They simply cannot be replicated nationally. And then there is that approval rating again. Plus 9% 2 months ago, minus 11 today. 20 points lost, my friends. Not from a policy failure, not from a scandal, just from people getting to know him better as the national spotlight intensified. That is a warning sign, and nobody's talking about it. So, my friends, here's my verdict, and I'll give it to you straight. Andy Burnham is not Keir Starmer in jeans. That charge is slightly unfair, and I don't want to be unfair. He is warmer, more human, more instinctively connected to the communities Labour has been hemorrhaging. But here is what is also true. On the question that actually determines whether a Prime Minister succeeds, immigration, fiscal policy, the structural changes that require taking on bond markets and establishment resistance, I cannot find the clear water between him and his predecessor. The U-turns, the vague change rhetoric, with no blueprint behind it, the approval rating collapsing before he's even started. That is a pattern we have seen before. Starmer walked in with a landslide and had no plan. By every account we have, Burnham is walking in with a by-election win and no plan either. I genuinely hope I'm wrong, because this country needs a Prime Minister who is actually different. It doesn't need another repackaging, it needs substance. And if Andy Burnham turns out to have that substance, if once in number 10 he proves the Starmer and Jeans crown is wrong, I will be the first to give him credit. But my friends, you heard it here first. Put a bet on it by Christmas. We will be having a very different conversation about Andy Burnham. Now look, this is genuinely one of those debates where I think reasonable people can disagree. I know some of you watching this will be thinking I've been too hard on him, and some of you will think I haven't been nearly hard enough on him. That is exactly the conversation I want us to have down below. So what do you guys think? Is he Labour's genuine answer, or is the Starmer and Jeans charge fair? Well, let me know down below, because the comment section I think is going to be absolutely brilliant. I can really tell. So I shall just bid you farewell and take care, my friends.